Hello and welcome to There's No Business Like, a podcast where friends and industry colleagues explore topics and interview leaders in our industry of professional theatrical touring.
Welcome back to There's No Business Like. I'm Josh Benson with the Marion Cultural and Civic Center in Marion, Illinois. I'm hanging out here with my friends Danielle.
Hey, it's Danielle from the Alden in McLean, Virginia.
Katie.
Hey everyone, Katie Miller with the Midland Center for the Arts in Midland, Michigan.
Brian.
Brian Zelmer, KU Presents in Kutztown, Pennsylvania.
And Big Bear Kevin Maynard.
Kevin Maynard, Quad City Arts in Rock Island, Illinois.
We've got a great interview with my friend Peter Palermo today, but as I was talking to him and it became obvious that he's very happy and comfortable with the position that he's got in the industry right now and with the space that he has. My question to you is there a specific time in your life where you finally felt comfortable with where and who you were?
No. Next question.
I'm comfortable with who Kevin is.
Yeah, me too.
Thanks, Danielle. I appreciate that. Yeah. I guess to be honest, it comes in waves. I think there are moments in my life where I feel very much like who I am and I'm doing what I should be doing. But there's a lot of times where I think imposter syndrome takes over and I go, what am I doing? Like, clearly I don't know what I'm doing, but there always comes a moment where I have that moment of clarity where I go, I am good at what I do. I do know what I'm talking about. I think the older that I get, it happens more and more often. And I don't know if that's age or if that's just time in the field or what that is. But I would like that to happen more often. That would be pretty cool.
This is a great question, Josh.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I have really come into my own in the last, I would say like 18 months, 2 years. And I think that's because I've just been investing in myself. And this is going to sound, I think, probably really shallow, but maybe other people out there can relate to it. Like, I started thinking about myself in terms of like, how do I want to present myself to the world and what makes me happy? And I started buying myself new clothes that actually fit and matched my style and made me feel good about myself. And I started spending time with people that inspire me and support me in very different ways than I had been supported and inspired in the past. And I know myself better personally than I ever had before. I'm feeling a lot more like myself.
Just meeting and working with you guys have helped me become more comfortable with who I am. And even in those times where I'd be on and off and on and off, I kind of stop myself when I feel those off times. And I'm like, why do I feel off? And it's because usually I'm trying to project an image or change myself around other people instead of just being myself, which I keep going back to and probably making people sick of that. So I catch myself in those moments now when I feel like, oh, I've got to reserve something here and say, no, go with your gut and be who you are. And just if other people don't like it, it's okay. For too long, I've tried to be such a people pleaser and just always make everyone else happy around me instead of just being myself. And so that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I at the beginning of my career when I was at Wolf Trap, I remember like really thinking about this mostly because I felt so out of place and not necessarily with who I was professionally, but it was sort of like who I was personally in that professional space, because I just felt like so many of the people I was around were just so polished and put together. And like, honestly, like coming from Pennsylvania to Virginia, like people are taller here. And I just didn't feel like I fit into like this location. Like it just felt so foreign to me. I do feel a lot more comfortable with who I am now. And I wish I could like figure out where and when it was, but like Katie, I think it has been within the last couple of months. I think my job at the Alden has been so wonderful and I think has helped a lot with it. But I think I do feel a lot more comfortable now with who I am as a person than I did, 2 years ago, but definitely like 10 plus years ago for sure.
So for me, it's not until pretty recently in the last couple of years during the pandemic that I really kind of found my own and found comfort in who I am. And some of that has to do with a newfound attitude of positivity and viewing things through a positive lens. But a lot of it also has to do with so many things changed with the venue here that I finally felt 100% supported from the community. And it's amazing what just that feeling of being supported does for feeling like you're really in your place. For me, that was the biggest change. Our guest today, Peter Palermo, talks about the support that he feels in his current position and a number of other things. Enjoy the interview.
I'm Peter Palermo. I'm the executive director of the Sheldon Arts Foundation, which runs the Sheldon Concert Hall and Art Galleries.
Thank you for joining us, Peter.
My pleasure.
You have been in the industry for quite a while and in a few different roles. How did you initially get started or even get interested in the arts to begin with? Where did your story begin in the arts world?
So I always had a love for music and performing. At first, I thought maybe I was going to be an actor and went to school to do that. Music was always there too. My grandmother, of all people, turned me on to a lot of music when I was young. She owned a record store in Jefferson City, Missouri. But I was not blessed with any talent. So that was a problem for me. But I realized that I had just as much fun and had just as much passion for everything that happened backstage. I was a gypsy. I wandered. I spent years trying to find my way. Ended up in San Francisco, where I learned about production, did all sorts of work on the production side of things, running a music festival out there in San Francisco.
So what areas of production were you involved in?
So for a long time, I was production stage manager for a bunch of dance companies, and I would go on the road doing, running the whole production. So I wasn't I was not the lighting designer. I was not the costume designer, but those folks had to, answer to me, and I ran the budget, and I was the mother hen for all the performers, and I did all the logistics of the travel and all of that. It was fun. I had a good time doing that. I'm a problem solver, and that job presents you with new problems to be solved every day, every hour, and that's fun for me.
Yeah, and the production manager is such an important role in the tour life as it is, simply because you're literally the one making everything happen day to day, keeping everybody on schedule, dressing room assignments, top to bottom. Yeah,
that's it. And keeping your artistic director happy, too. They would often travel with us.
And that's the hardest part of the job.
Yes, it is. They would always surprise me. But again, these are the problems to solve, right? This is fun. But I had a great time, especially all through the 90s, just on the road, going to Europe, going all across the United States. I feel sometimes I laugh because I'll meet our colleagues from wherever theater they're from, and I go, oh yeah, I've been there. I played that room, and it's fun. I know those rooms, and I would always say that when we'd walk into a space, you could tell if the space was loved or not, right? Mm-hmm. If this was a loved house or if it's everybody's here just phoning it in. I always wanted to be the kind of place that people walked in the door and they could tell the love was there, right?
Yeah. So the details are so important.
Yeah. You got to care.
Yeah.
You got to care.
And even starting at the advance of a show, you get a good feeling for a house.
Yeah, for sure. So I eventually, gave up the dance part and really focused on music in San Francisco and did this live outdoor festival. We'd get like 10,000 people coming through, and then all of a sudden I'm in charge of porta potties and hot dogs and security and everything on top of that.
The sexy aspects of the music industry.
Yes, right.
Hot dogs and porta potties.
That's right. Related. It was fun. Again, I loved that part of the work. I loved all the problems to solve, like all of a sudden you've got a hornet's nest. Somebody's kicked up a hornet's nest in the middle of your outdoor festival. And like, okay, what do we do now? And that story was, unfortunately, the cops, because they're who they are, came in and took charge, right? And then they all end up getting stung by these angry hornets. And so I had to set up a triage tent for the cops.
Well, at least they were in charge to get stung. That's helpful. And there's a little bit of swift justice there.
It's exactly
you
right.
take control, Karma. And once you take control...
Yeah, it's all yours.
It's all yours.
So around 2005, I'd finished doing this big makeover of this concert venue where we worked. And I'd sort of run out of steam.
And what venue was that?
This is called Stern Grove, which is an outdoor venue. It's like a natural amphitheater in San Francisco. It's a beloved place, free concerts all summer long. I had sort of just like I'd run out of steam. I was done. I did the big project. I did the big construction project from beginning to end. That took 5 years to rebuild it, and it was wonderful, and I loved it. And I just didn't see the job was going to go anywhere. It was only going to get more boring from there on out, right? So I talked to my wife, and I said, "Listen, I grew up in the Midwest. The Midwest is a great place to grow up. Why don't we take our kid?" By that time, we had a baby, and San Francisco's a lousy place to try to raise a family. My wife said, "Yeah, let's go to the Midwest. It's awesome. We'll do it." And it was wonderful. So it was the best decision I made. We landed right in Lebanon, Illinois.
Big metropolis.
So I took my wife from San Francisco to Lebanon, Illinois. And we're standing, I remember vividly, we're standing, and we're still married. So she didn't leave me.
That's a win.
That's a win. So I remember we're standing there in front of our temporary housing where the university I took a job for. I wanted to run a theater, and there was no theaters in San Francisco. And so I found one in Lebanon, Illinois that wanted me to run it, and that was great. But I remember standing there with the moving truck, and we're standing in front of our temporary housing, and you can hear cows mooing in the distance. And my wife just looked at me, "What have you done? What have you done to me?"
Not quite the same soundscape as San Francisco at that point.
No, but it was great. That was the Hettenhausen Center for the Arts, the Het in Lebanon, Illinois, McKendree University, and it was great. I came in. The Het was not yet complete. It was still under construction. They had built themselves a 600-seat hall or 500-seat hall, and they didn't know what to do with it, honestly. They knew they wanted it, but they weren't sure what they could do. And so that was a perfect place for me to come in and really learn how to present.
And were you the first?
I was the
first director of that venue?
First director. I came in when it was still being built and was able to make some changes that I saw needed to happen based on all those years on the road.
So you were able to kind of curate the personality of that space.
Yeah, it was great.
And what was that journey like, curating the personality of a new theater?
I knew that I wanted to bring them things that they hadn't seen before, but I also wanted them to give them things that were familiar, that they would love, that I knew that they would love. So I wanted to do both of those things. You know, for example, I booked modern dance. You won't have seen this before. And I remember vividly some husband coming up to me afterwards, and he says, "Well, I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but I sure did like it." I was like, "Well, that's the best compliment I can hear. You know, you didn't think you were going to like this, and you did, and now you're happy about it, and you're going to come back." So it was great. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I felt like I had a lot to bring to the table for McKendree and for the Het, just with all the groups I'd seen, all of the stuff I'd seen, the years I'd been at APAP before I got to the Het. I felt like I had a lot that I could draw on, a lot of relationships I could draw on that make it interesting for them, but also comforting and familiar at the same time. I wanted to push it, but not too far, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's that perfect balance. And that's how progress happens, is getting them in a place where they're comfortable.
Yeah.
But then being able to push them a little bit beyond that every other show.
Yeah, exactly. You know, sometimes the movie guys talk about, there's one for me and one for them, you know. And I didn't quite take it that way, but I was definitely like, okay, with my season, I looked at the season as a journey, right? And sort of an arc, and like, okay, I've got my anchors that I know are going to be, you know, that's Thanksgiving dinner, right? That's that's the meat and potatoes. All right, where is this crazy side dishes that nobody's expecting? Where are those going to come in? So it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. And the president at McKendree at that time, he was the guy who had this vision that they were going to build this performing arts center, and so he was 100% behind it. I can't say enough about his leadership and his visionary approach. That made all the difference. And he left. He and I basically left the same year, 2018, when I came here.
You're now at the Sheldon.
Yeah.
And talk to us about the Sheldon and what that is, what you do for the community here.
Well, so here it's different because I'm the executive director, and I've got to worry about everything. At the university, you know, you don't have to worry about security, and you don't have to worry about paying the insurance. You don't have to worry about a lot, honestly. It's very comfortable. You really just have to worry about your little piece of the pie. But now that I'm executive director, I have to worry about it all, and I got to worry about a board of directors and, you know, keeping the staff happy and making sure that at the end of the year the book's balanced. But I wanted that job. I was getting frustrated with decisions that I didn't have any control over.
As it is at a university so
yeah,
often.
Exactly. As it is. There's so much you don't have any control over. And I was tired of that. And I was like, okay, well, what is the line in Spider-Man? With great power comes great responsibility, right? So, okay, you have the decision-making power, but now you have the decision-making power, and you gotta deal with it. So it's been great to walk into this place, which has got so much history. My predecessor as executive director had been here 25 years. So in a lot of ways, that's like a founder. So I'm following those big footsteps. So I have to, again, bring the audience, come meet them where they are, where they're comfortable, give them what they've come to expect, but now also bring in the Palermo spice and the flavor that's different than what they've seen before.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden COVID happened. So that was a pivot in a lot of ways. But it was wonderful too, and not to keep quoting people, but I think Churchill has said, like, never let a good crisis go to waste, and it did. I was able to change some directions and make some changes here that have been wonderful, that have made a big difference. So we were able to keep everybody on. We furloughed people for a couple of weeks, but in the end, we were able to bring everybody back very quickly and keep the place going. We did a lot of construction, like this room we're sitting in right now. We were able to totally gut it and refurbish it during the pandemic. So it's been a journey, but I couldn't be happier about where we are.
So what all does the Sheldon as an organization do? You have a museum space, you have a performance hall.
We have a great concert hall, 700-seat concert hall that's really music. The music is it's bread and butter. It's a gorgeous space for music. Musicians love it, but I have to be careful about what kind of music goes in there. It's not great for a big, loud rock group as much as I wish it was. It's better for acoustically driven, whether that's classical or jazz or folk or country. That's where it really shines. When you can actually hear the instruments from the stage as opposed to relying on the PA. Also spoken word. Comedy is actually great in that space, or lectures. And then we do have a gallery where we do original visual artworks, often from local or regional artists. But right now we've got a photography exhibit from the actor Jeff Bridges, who's, as it turns out, has been taking photos with the same camera for 40 years. And his work is really cool. While you're here, you'll have to go down and look at it.
I would love to.
It's great. And so that's what I was kind of trying to throw in, again, some bigger stuff once in a while to get some attention. We're on a block here in Washington Avenue where there's two other big art museums just down the street. Contemporary Art Museum and the Pulitzer Art Museum are right next door. And they're serious, really serious art museums. And, so we're on a street where we've got some heavy hitters. So we have to figure out, how are we different? And just like on the performing arts side, we're also next door to the Fox, the fabulous Fox Theater here.
And Powell Symphony Hall.
And Jazz the Bistro. So how are we different? What do we do that's different? We're not the Fox. We're not Powell. What do we do? What do we provide? What is our niche, right? Where are we? And so I'm finding it. To me, it's about authenticity, and it's about, as far as what kind of music you're going to hear, authenticity, virtuosity, original singular voices that really shine in that space. That's what I want to bring here. And then we also have event spaces, which we do robust rental work. You're in one of them right now, a 500-seat banquet room. And then we also have a lovely ballroom. It's original from 1912 that we do. It's got a little cabaret stage on it.
Wow.
You'll see that before you go. It's great space. Sheldon's a great place to get married. A lot of people do. They get married in the concert hall and then go up to the ballroom or come in here for their party. So
wow.
It's got a lot of sides to this business. And we own the parking lot, which we sell, parking spaces. We have our bar. The only thing we don't do is cook. We bring in caterers, but everything else we do here.
That's a lot for an executive director coming from the space that you were in before. That's a lot of irons in the fire. So can you talk to me a little bit about the difference culturally from a business standpoint between being a university presenter
and
then being the executive director of an arts and and exhibition and rental venue.
At the university, you know, and it's interesting too, because now I'm the president of the Plains Presenters, which is the sort of the presenters consortium that is Missouri, Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa. I think we still have somebody in South Dakota, and I think we have one in Illinois. I think the Het is still on board, just the other side of the river. And I look at all the presenters that are on that list with us, and by far they are attached to universities. You know, you and I are unique now, are becoming more and more rare, which are independent. And even you work for the city, right? The city-owned venue.
Yep.
So I look at our space then, which is an independent nonprofit that operates its own venue and does its own season. That's becoming a rarer and rarer thing. You know, the universities allow a performing arts space to take some chances, do some interesting art, and, you know, maybe play to a half-empty house a lot. Mm-hmm. And that's okay, because the university has other irons in the fire, or other missions to that they're seeking to fulfill, right? Maybe the university, the way I always sold it at the university to my president was like, this is marketing. I'm bringing people to the university. They're having a wonderful time. They're coming here and seeing, you know, what an elevated, you know, intellectual space this is that this university provides. And that's marketing money. And you know what? You're not even losing any money, because I'm going to break even most of the time. Mm-hmm. So it's a good investment for you, Mr. President of the university. You are doing great outreach. You get the best people in the community are coming here and having a great time. Then your development department can come down and meet those people. I always talked about stocking the pond. I was restocking the pond for the development department at the university all the time. So then, you know, it was up to them then to do that work. So I thought it was a great relationship and it worked well. I would get frustrated, though, sometimes about, you know, where I think in general, and I'm not going to say this just about McKendree, because I think it's across the nation. Higher education's in trouble. There are fewer students. Costs are going, you know, through the roof, as anybody who's in college would know. College tuition's not going up because there's a bunch of greedy people. It's because there's so much that has to be paid for. The portion of money that the state or the federal government is only shrinking. It's only going down. Those budgets are only going down, and so that has to be made up somewhere. And at the same time, there's like an arms race for, you know, for student housing and what kind of dining hall or the sports that they offer, and all those things cost money too. And you're not going to attract any new students if they look at the dorms and they're beat up and they're run down. You're not going to bring in any. So it's this terrible cycle right now. And young people, the actual number of young people in the Midwest is also going down. It's tough. It's a tough place to be. I wanted to be out of that higher education milieu. I thought I wanted to be the ultimate person responsible. And so that's what I did. And I looked around at where I would want to go. And I wanted to stay in St. Louis because I got family here. And I thought, well, I only want the Sheldon. The Sheldon's like the only place that I would want to be. And they've got the same director there for 25 years. He's not going anywhere. And then, whoa, boom, like a year later, he announced his retirement. And so I jumped in as hard as I could, and I wanted that job. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really worked to get that, to land this position. I wanted it. So I'm count myself pretty lucky every day that I ended up here, because I love it. Mm-hmm. I love this place. Did I answer your question about the differences between the higher ed side? You can take more chances on higher ed, right? You can do some risky things.
As far as higher education versus the Sheldon, here you answer to a board of directors. Yep. There you answer to president of the university and different deans of schools. And do you feel that there are different pressures from a programming side as to what they want to see between the two? And what are the levels of those pressures like between the two avenues?
I mean, for sure, the faculty wanted a say in what was happening. I wanted their partnership. I also didn't want to program based on their desires only, right? So it was a dance to keep them happy and make them feel like I was listening to them, but also still accomplishing the bookings and the vision that I wanted to complete. So that was a dance, and it they understood. They get it. Nobody wants to program an art season by committee. Mm-hmm. It's terrible to do it that way. So somebody's got to be given the job to do it. So I would find ways to bring them in. Like, what can we do together that's like programmatic, that's interesting to you? How can I garner your interest and get you pulling the plow for me a little bit here? Get your students here. That was the big thing.
Yeah.
Get your students in the building. I want to partner with you because then you're going to demand that your students attend. Because there was that pressure always to get the students in the building, which was tough. It was tough. They all got their phones.
Were you also managing for student events there as well?
No, there was another department that managed student events. But frankly, I felt like, it's just you and me here, right?
Yeah.
Nobody else is listening. I thought that programming was lacking, and I thought what we were doing was more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But still, it's tough. I mean, it's tough to get those students out of their dorms, out of whatever they're doing. And they're busy. They're all like on teams, and they all have homework, and they're all working out, and they're all on dates. And, do they want to come see modern dance? A few of them do. And, maybe on a bigger university with 40,000 students, for sure, there's an audience there. I think that those bigger schools, the Illinois, the, Mizzou's, those bigger schools, they can have some really robust programming, and they can take some of that the student activity fund.
Mm-hmm.
They'll also get some of that too. That'll help them with their programming. That didn't happen at McKendree's. McKendree's is too small. 1,500 students, on campus. It's a very small campus. So those are the pressures. What I also see now in other organizations is when the leadership changes at the university, the whole dynamic changes with the relationship the university presenting. If the new president comes in and doesn't share that the arts are important, then all of a sudden they're not important, and they're not getting the funding that they used to get. And all of a sudden it's like, no, you're not, you need to book more Disney and less interesting, quote unquote, interesting stuff, and do more safe stuff. You need to make money on every show. Why are you here? What is it that you do for us?
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Arts Presenter. It can be a very vulnerable place when the leadership changes at the university too. Because I think being president of a university is about as being close to being a king as you can get, honestly. They have to answer to board of directors too, but there's a lot that they can do.
What's the difference between that in the educational setting and working with your board of directors here at the Sheldon?
So my board here, they're here because they love the Sheldon, right? They walk in the door wanting to help the Sheldon because they believe in it, and they love our mission. They love what we do for the community. They love the kind of stuff we present. So they're already on board. Whereas at the university, I think there was always like some thoughts like, why are we spending this money on presenting arts? We could pay another full-time faculty member with this money. We could, whatever. There was so many competing interests for those dollars that there was always somebody who was going to see that this was a waste of time and a waste of money. But whereas here, the board is 100% on board. They walk in the door, they want what's best for the Sheldon every time they meet. They just want what's best. Now, does there pressure for me to do things that they want as opposed to what I want? Yeah, but it's usually not around art. It's usually around other things where I actually want them to be involved. They're usually more around things about their own governance. How's the board governing? Usually, they understand that the art we present can't be done by committee, and so they don't try. They want to be involved. They want to feel like their time is valuable, and that's the goal for me, is to make it a really enriching experience for them that also benefits the Sheldon.
That's a huge difference.
It's a huge difference,
and feeling supported is a huge difference.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it in your own life when you've got a leader of your organization, your city or university, who's on board versus one who's not on board.
Yeah, and
it's huge.
And the perspective with someone who's not that supportive is, minimize any losses, focus on what you can bring to the community.
Yeah.
Focus on what you have to offer to enrich the lives of the people around here.
Yeah.
And those are worlds apart.
Those are totally different missions.
Yeah.
With totally different missions. One of them feels very much profit motivated, and the other one feels community and artistically motivated. And I'm interested in that. I'm interested in making our community richer and bringing them what they haven't seen and working with them to bring them what they want, as opposed to just making $1.
Yeah.
And, as well as I do, a 700-seat hall, it's not going to make a lot of dollars anyway.
But you've got all these robust rental spaces around you that helps.
Well, and that's what helps undergird, right?
Yeah.
That's what helps for sure. The rental business helps the music business end of it, because as you know, It's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough to make on based on 700 seats. It's tough.
I'm going to take you in a slightly different direction.
Okay.
I want to take you back to right when you got into the arts world and jumped onto your first tour. What advice would you have for yourself back then? And then I'll take you to another point and ask you the same thing.
So my first real legit showbiz job was I was props master for a touring company doing Carmen, the opera. And it was 60 25-year-old kids on the road for 16 weeks. It was nuts. It was like a rolling sorority party. So I guess I would say to myself, hey, take this a little more seriously. I wasted a lot of time in my life just kind of chasing fun. Mm-hmm. And I could have, I look at you and where you sit at your age, and I look at me where I sit at my age. I wasted a lot of time just having a good time, which I would tell myself to okay, having a good time's important.
A couple of years is good, but it's time to buckle down.
Yeah, it's time to buckle down and do the work. Do the work. And I think, probably getting a family is a pretty good, I remember hearing Francis Coppola, the director, talk about the same topic. What advice would you give to a young artist coming up? He's like, get married, have a couple kids. That'll straighten you out. You will deliver because you have to.
Moving forward, timeline-wise, you just got dropped into the middle of a cow pasture in the Midwest, about to run your theater for the first time.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for yourself jumping in as a presenter at that point?
Be okay with what you don't know. Don't try to prove yourself, right? It's okay to walk through the world not knowing and letting people know that you don't know, right? Because that's how you learn. That's how you learn. So it's okay.
Well, and one thing I found in the industry, especially at the conferences and in our industry, within our crowd, there are so many people willing to step up.
Oh.
If you are willing and vulnerable enough to be open and say, I don't know.
Yeah.
There are so many people willing to step out.
What does a back-end deal mean? What does that mean exactly? Will you tell me, please?
And I got last year there was something in a contract and I just didn't understand it.
Yeah.
Most favored nations rate for merchandise. And I was like, I just called the agent. I'm like, you've got to educate me here.
Yeah.
I have no idea what we're talking about. And essentially she said, whoever gets the best rate for merch on the tour,
we want that.
Everybody
rate.
On the tour gets that rate.
Yeah.
And she said, and I was like, oh, okay. She says it's a way to even the playing field. And that way the tour manager at the beginning of the tour knows what the merch rate is the entire way through and isn't changing their rates every night. I was like, oh, that makes a ton of sense. Why in the world is it called Most Favored Nations?
Right, that's crazy.
And she said, I have no idea, but that's what it is. I'm like, okay, great. And that was Abby Bass, and she's amazing and open and generous with her knowledge like that. And
what I didn't realize when I got into this is how important the relationships are with the agents.
Yeah.
I didn't realize.
And that it's not transactional.
Right.
It's all relationship based.
Yeah. It's so important. And I didn't know that either going in.
That's a great piece of advice is focus on the relationships in the business world.
Because they're going to be there every year for you. Now after COVID, it seems like everybody switched 3 seats over to the left, and it's all, there's a lot of turmoil, but they're sorting out now, and they're landing where they're going to land, I think. Yeah. But anyway, I think those relationships are long-term relationships, and they start to understand what you're trying to find, and they'll start directing that to you, and they want you to work. They want you to be successful just as much as you want to be successful. Yeah. And they're not going to burn it on one show.
Yeah.
Right. They're not going to burn that relationship.
Yeah. It's a long game.
Yeah.
So one further question for you. At this point in your career and at this point in the industry, what's your favorite thing about the industry?
Well, besides standing in the back of my hall and listening to, we just had Leo Kottke last week, right? Great. What a great guitar player. What a wonderful performer, storyteller. Just to stand in the back of the hall and feel so good about the performer and the work that we're bringing in, a hall full of people who are having a great time because they haven't seen him in years. And that's it, right? That's the cherry on top for me is those moments. Is that my favorite part? I think my favorite part, honestly, is what we're just doing right now, which is planning next year. right? It's the booking. I like because there's nothing set. There's nothing printed. The calendar's empty. I'm just open to whatever comes my way right now. We're like for like the next 6 or 8 weeks. It's kind of where we are. And that's a fun play. I love that. I love that rhythm. I love that time where you're...
And it's a point of exploration at the same time.
Yeah. And it's a good time to be a buyer, you know, when you're looking to make a deal. It's a fun time. I like going to conferences. I like meeting all my colleagues and seeing what they're doing. What are they hearing about where their direction are? And, you know, there's always such a rich field full of colleagues with creativity. And I could just listen to my colleagues talk all the time. Well, your podcast is great because there's so many of them are doing such great, interesting stuff that I never would have thought of. And now I'm going to steal it.
Is it Picasso that said, artists borrow, but great artists steal?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right.
Well, Peter, thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
My pleasure.
Also for the space here at the Sheldon. It's fabulous. And thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Josh, thanks so much for sitting down with Peter. Our listeners probably don't know this about me, but my mom is actually from St. Louis. So I've spent a significant amount of time in St. Louis. And between this and the Bob Bennett interview, I feel like I know a ton more about the St. Louis art scene. I have never been to the Sheldon, but I'm definitely going to go check it out next time I'm in town. It sounds like an incredible venue and they do so much there. And I really loved what Peter had to say about finding a niche for his theater, really utilizing the acoustics of the hall and figuring out what kind of music really plays the best in there and not trying to replicate what their neighbors are doing, because there are some really great venues, like he mentioned, right on that same corridor. So it made a lot of sense to me that he really focuses on trying to program things that work in concert with and are not directly competing with what other venues in the region are doing. And I really love that he focuses on, he said, authenticity, virtuosity, and original singular voices. I really just kind of love that way of thinking about programming and finding things that are unique and not copycats of, what everyone else in the region is doing.
I also appreciated this conversation that we've had about, that cultural versus commercial kind of booking and programming. And I loved his analogy for that. He equating it to a Thanksgiving dinner, where you have your meat and potatoes, the things that, are going to make your money, and those crazy side dishes, or his, as he put it, the Palermo Spice, which I also appreciated. I just thought it was a really good way to sort of break down, what we strive to do at a lot of venues without, kind of just talking in some of our industry lingo.
When he was talking about being a university presenter, that brought to light some things that I didn't really know about what it's like to kind of be in those shoes and to think about how vulnerable those presenters are when there's a leadership change, or, how the taste of the president of the university can really impact a lot of the decisions that are made. But the thing that I thought was really interesting was when he talked about how his audience is good for the university because he's restocking the pond for their development team. I think that that's a great way to frame what you're doing if you're in a vulnerable position. And it's a way to show that you're working with other parts of your organization in a time when that's something that I feel like comes up often as a thing that people are striving more to do, to work more cross team or cross area. And, if you're in a position where you're looking to make your program very vulnerable to a larger institution that you're a part of, that's super, super smart.
Judging by conversations that I've been having with colleagues who are in that college and university setting, it sounds like Peter probably got out at the right time, because with the dropping in admission rates and the increased expenses, they are having tighter and tighter budgets. So that presenting style of being able to focus on the more artistic forms of art or the more cultural art forms and having a half empty house just isn't a possibility anymore, or is becoming less and less common.
To me, listening to that conversation and knowing what some of our university presenter colleagues are going through, it seems to me like this is a little bit of a mission versus economics, like mission-based programming versus economics-based programming situation that university presenters find themselves in now.
So, Brian, you have a unique perspective because you've worked for two different collegiate and university systems in New Jersey and then now at Kutztown. what is your experience of what the current landscape of university presenting is like in 2023?
Peter kind of touched on this, but in the last 5 years, my experience and speaking with my colleagues, being highly involved in things like the APAP College and University Presenters Affinity and with the PA presenters, unfortunately, what I'm seeing is a lot more of that questioning that Peter talked about of why is that program part of a university? Because universities right now are across the board seeing reduction in tuition and attendance, and they're just trying to find ways to make ends meet. And they're saying, well, why are we spending all this money on an arts program for the community? And of course, we know the answer to that, and many of us do. A lot of people in our community know the answer to that. But unfortunately, I've seen all too often in these last 5 years, a lot of programs actually get cut from the higher ed scene, and a lot more pressure on the finances of bringing in the money, as Peter talked about, not necessarily bringing in quote unquote Disney, but bringing in more of the commercial type programs. And that's my experience in PA presenters as well. Across our state here, a lot of our college and university presenters, some of them actually have already been cut, their programs eliminated. And we have a lot that have been basically given a warning that they better turn things around financially, et cetera. So it is a very different focus, unfortunately, in this setting at this time. But I will agree exactly what Peter said. It plays a lot into the hands of the administration, and in particular, the sitting president at each college and university, because like in my case, I'm very fortunate right now to have a very supportive president of my arts program. But if he leaves or retires, I know that a new president could come in and have a completely different viewpoint and completely change what my mission and vision for my department will be, or even eliminate my department possibly. So that's always something that is on the top of my mind.
Josh, I'm also really jealous of the fact that you got to spend time in that space. I mean, just hearing Peter talk about all the different, spaces he has and the things that building is doing, and knowing like where it's located, the challenges that it also presents, and, knowing he's found success. So I would love if you could share a little bit about walking through that venue and seeing the things that he often said, we'll check that out before you leave.
So the niche of that venue is really, really cool, because he has two enormous venues right beside him, and then he has Jazz St. Louis right across the street, and they're all presenting their own things. But he's found this niche, and so much of it has to do with the sound of the hall. That hall, going in and standing on the stage, it's very obviously a concert hall. There's no curtains. There's actually like an amphitheater, almost shell behind the stage. And then all of the seats are this beautiful hardwood tone. And it's this very rich, beautiful hall with stained glass. And I couldn't speak enough to how cool that hall is. It's also probably one of the coolest green rooms I've ever been in. It's got like 16-foot ceilings, and like every wall is covered in bookcases, and a big fireplace, and like gorgeous furniture, and it's amazing. And it literally walks directly onto the stage. He references some of the other spaces in the building. And so like their rental space for like wedding receptions and things like that are actually a converted parking garage. They've got this little space that has a little stage in it. It's almost like a little bandstand room, but it is original to the original building from 1920, and it is gorgeous as well. In addition, they also have this museum space. And while I was there, he mentions the Jeff Bridges photo display. It was incredible, and it was just a wonderful experience. But he's found success because of the way that hall works with the musicians that are in there and the sound that it produces. But he also talked about how the economics of the building work to where those other spaces support the music efforts there. I mentioned that he shares a parking lot with the fabulous Fox Theater in St. Louis, and they charge for their parking there. And so they have income from the parking from the other theater that helps to support their theater. And so it's just really cool how the economics of that all work together to create and function with this amazing space that is there. That's a gem for the community in St. Louis.
And the way that he was talking to about those rentals, I feel like a lot of times, when you're an arts presenter and you are referring to rentals, it's like a thorn in your side or like a little bit of a pain. But he was so glad to see people getting married in his theater and enjoying all of those spaces for how beautiful and how wonderful they are. And they're a great economic driver to be able to stay afloat and make the theater work.
When Peter mentioned Leo Kottke, it suddenly brought back this memory. I worked with Leo once when I was at the Rialto. And one thing that I've always loved to do is drive artists whenever possible. I like to be like, when they need ground transportation, I always tried, if it was possible for me to do it, to be the driver. One, it gave you more time with the artist, like this individual one-on-one time to get to know them a little better and them you. But so many times it's led to so many great conversations where I've learned things from these masters, and Leo Kottke was one of them. And I remember him talking about his love of jazz music. Now, he's not a jazz musician if you're not familiar with him, but we had a really nice conversation about jazz, which was really cool.
Well, thank you all for joining me. Thank you, Peter, for your time. And thank you for the space. We recorded this episode with Peter there. We also recorded the interview with Bob Bennett of Jazz St. Louis there. So thank you for affording us that space to have these interviews and have these conversations. Thank you guys for joining in. We'll see y'all next time.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to There's No Business Like. Our producers and hosts are Brian Zelmer, Josh Benson, Kevin Maynard, Katie Miller, and me, Danielle Van Hook. Views expressed in this podcast are ours alone and are not reflective of the organizations we are a part of. Keep up with us at nobusinesslike.com. There you'll find links to all of our episodes and socials. If you like this podcast, give us a like, a follow, a review, or our favorite, a 5-star rating. Oh wait, what was that site? I got it, don't worry. It is nobusinesslike.com. Do I sound out butts I-ness every time I type it? Yep, sure do. Stay in touch, my friends. So, like, dudes with beards must be a thing in St. Louis.
Peter dresses up for Halloween as Colonel Sanders.
I thought you were going to say Bob Bennett.
Oh, that would be amazing.